In the lawless frontier town of Dust Creek, Arizona, an 18-year-old Mexican stable boy tends to horses for pennies while enduring daily humiliation from his boss and the townsfolk. When a notorious wanted gunslinger rides in desperately seeking help for his injured horse, the only thing standing between him and his dying daughter, the entire town turns their backs in fear. But young Sam Cortez steps forward to help, and for his act of compassion, he's brutally beaten and left bloodied in the dirt. What Sam doesn't know is that this mysterious gunslinger carries a secret that connects him to the most powerful man in the territory. And by sundown, when riders fill the dusty streets of Dust Creek, justice will be served in ways no one could have imagined. Before we dive into this tale of courage and redemption, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers. The morning sun blazed mercilessly over Dust Creek, Arizona territory, painting the desert town in shades of gold and rust. It was 1883, and the frontier was still wild, still unforgiving. Main Street stretched like a scar through the settlement, flanked by weathered buildings that seemed to lean on each other for support against the endless wind. Dust devils danced between the hitching posts while tumbleweeds rolled past the Silver Dollar Saloon like lazy ghosts. At Murphy's livery stable on the edge of town, the day had already begun with its familiar rhythm of inequality. The large wooden structure, with its peeling red paint and creaking doors, housed some of the finest horses in the territory. But the man who tended them with the most care wasn't the one getting the credit. Samuel Cortez, 18 years old with calloused hands and shoulders broad from hauling feed sacks, worked like his life depended on it. His dark hair was always damp with sweat beneath his worn hat, and his clothes, a faded blue shirt and patched brown trousers, bore the honest stains of hard labor. While other young men his age lounged outside the saloon or played cards, Sam was always moving, always working, always trying to prove he belonged. But belonging was a luxury he couldn't afford in a town where his brown skin and Mexican surname marked him as an outsider from birth. The other stable hands treated him like hired help, even though he knew more about horses than any of them. They'd shout orders at him, calling him boy or Cortez, never Sam, never with respect. "Hey, Cortez," barked Jake Murphy, the owner's eldest son, a lazy 20-something with soft hands and a mean streak. "That chestnut mare in stall 3 needs her hooves cleaned, and don't take all day about it." Sam nodded without looking up from the bridle he was mending. "Already done it, Jake. Twice this morning." "Well, do it again, and check the grain levels while you're at it." The other hands, Bull Henderson and Clem Watson, snickered from where they sat playing dice on a hay bale. "Kid never stops working," Bull observed, not with admiration but with the kind of amusement reserved for watching a dog chase its tail. "Has to," Clem replied, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Ain't like his kind get second chances in this town." Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept working. He'd learned long ago that fighting back with words only made things worse. His mother, Rosa, who worked her fingers raw sewing for the town's wealthier families, had taught him that dignity came from within, not from what others thought of you. But some days, that lesson felt heavier than the feed sacks he carried. The truth was, Sam was the best horseman in Dust Creek. He could read an animal's mood in its stance, diagnose lameness from 50 feet away, and calm the most spooked Mustang with nothing but his voice and gentle hands. The wealthy ranchers knew it too. They'd specifically request that the Mexican boy tend to their prized horses when they came to town. But when it came time for recognition or better pay, Sam remained invisible. Silas Murphy, the stable owner, was a hard man with gray whiskers and eyes like winter stones. He paid Sam half what he paid the white hands, worked him twice as long, and never missed an opportunity to remind him how generous he was being by employing his kind at all. As the morning wore on, the heat grew oppressive, and the sounds of Dust Creek filtered through the stable doors. Horses snorting, wagon wheels creaking, the distant piano from the saloon, and always the wind, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the promise of another day, where survival meant staying small, staying quiet, and staying grateful for whatever scraps of opportunity came his way. Sam had no idea that everything was about to change. The thundering of hooves broke through the lazy afternoon stillness like a gunshot. Sam looked up from the water trough he was scrubbing, his hands dripping as he shielded his eyes against the harsh sun. A lone rider was approaching fast from the eastern trail, his horse lathered with sweat and foam, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like a warning. The man sat his saddle with the kind of posture that spoke of a lifetime in leather, straight-backed but relaxed, moving with his mount like they were one creature. But something was wrong. Even from a distance, Sam could see the desperation in the way the rider leaned forward, urging his horse on despite the animal's obvious exhaustion. As they drew closer, details emerged that made Sam's breath catch. The horse, a magnificent black stallion, was favoring its left front leg, and dark stains marked its flanks, blood, fresh and concerning. The rider himself cut an imposing figure in a long black duster coat, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but his shoulders carried the tension of a man fighting time itself. The stranger reined up hard at the stable entrance, his horse dancing nervously as he dismounted. That's when Sam saw the iron-gray pistol hanging low on his hip, worn smooth from use, and the way his eyes swept the area like a man always watching for trouble. But it was the raw desperation in his voice that cut through everything else. "I need help," the man called out, his voice rough as gravel. "My horse threw a shoe 5 miles back, and she's got a bad gash on her leg. I need her patched up and ready to ride, fast." Jake Murphy emerged from the stable office, took one look at the stranger, and his face went pale. His eyes fixed on the distinctive black coat, the worn gun belt, the hard lines of a face that had seen too much violence. Recognition dawned like a cold sunrise. "Jesus Christ," Jake whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's Iron Hand Dalton." The name hit the stable like a physical blow. Bull and Clem scrambled to their feet, backing away instinctively. Even the horses seemed to sense the tension, shifting restlessly in their stalls. Jack Iron Hand Dalton, wanted in 3 territories for robbery and murder, with a bounty of $500 on his head, dead or alive. "Please," Dalton continued, either not noticing or not caring about their reaction. "My daughter's been bit by a sidewinder. She's dying, and the only doctor who's got the anti-venom is in Red Rock, 30 miles north. I can pay whatever you want, but I need this horse sound, and I need her now." His voice cracked slightly on the word daughter, and Sam saw something that cut through all the fear and legends. This was a father terrified of losing his child. But Jake Murphy was already shaking his head, backing toward the stable entrance. "No way in hell. We don't serve your kind here, Dalton. Take your blood money and your cursed horse and get out of my stable." "You don't understand," Dalton pressed, reaching into his coat. Several hands moved toward hidden weapons, but he only pulled out a small daguerreotype photograph. "She's only 8 years old. Look at her, please. She's got maybe 2 hours before the venom stops her heart." The photograph showed a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, sitting on a wooden fence. She had her father's eyes, but they held none of his hardness, only innocence and joy. Jake refused to even glance at it. "Should have thought about that before you chose the outlaw life. Now get, before I send Bull here to fetch the sheriff." Other townspeople had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Sam could see them through the stable doors. Merchants, cowboys, even some of the saloon girls, all watching with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Wanted posters with Dalton's face hung in half the businesses in town. To them, he wasn't a desperate father. He was $500 in reward money and a reputation for deadly violence. "I'm begging you," Dalton said, his composure finally cracking. "She's all I got left in this world. I'll pay double, triple your usual rate. Just please, help me save my little girl." But the circle of fear and judgment was tightening around him. Sam watched from the shadows, seeing not the legendary gunslinger, but a broken man watching time slip away like sand through desperate fingers. The silence stretched like a taut rope, filled only by the labored breathing of Dalton's injured horse and the distant murmur of gathering townspeople. Sam remained in the shadows near the water trough, watching the scene unfold with a growing knot in his stomach. He'd seen that look before, the way people's faces hardened when they decided someone wasn't worth their mercy. "You heard Jake?" Bull Henderson stepped forward, his hand resting meaningfully on the grip of his Colt. "We don't want no truck with outlaws. Your reputation's got blood all over it, Dalton." Clem spat into the dirt for emphasis. "Ain't no amount of money worth harboring a killer. Sheriff Hawkins would string us all up." Dalton's jaw worked silently, his eyes moving from face to face, finding nothing but rejection and fear. The photograph of his daughter trembled slightly in his weathered hands. "She didn't choose this life," he said quietly. "She don't deserve to die for my sins." "Should have considered that before you started robbing banks and gunning down lawmen," Jake sneered, growing bolder as more townspeople gathered behind him. "Now you got exactly 1 minute to mount up and ride out, or we'll collect that bounty ourselves." From his position by the water trough, Sam could see what the others couldn't or wouldn't. The horse's injury was severe but treatable. The gash along her left foreleg was deep but clean, and the thrown shoe had left her tender but not permanently lame. 20 minutes of careful work, maybe 30, and she'd be sound enough to carry a man 30 miles. 30 miles to save a little girl's life. But he also saw the fear in everyone's faces, the way they clustered together like sheep sensing wolves. In their minds, Jack Dalton wasn't a desperate father. He was death incarnate, a legend of violence that had ridden straight out of their worst nightmares. Sam's hands tightened on the rim of the water trough. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Mijo, sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same. When that happens, you got to look in your heart and decide what kind of man you want to be." Dalton was already turning away, defeat weighing down his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He tucked the photograph back into his coat and reached for his horse's reins with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. "Come on, girl," he whispered to the injured mare. "We'll figure something else out." But there was nothing else. They all knew it. Red Rock was the only town within 100 miles with a doctor who kept anti-venom in stock. By the time Dalton walked his injured horse there, or found another mount, his daughter would be cold in the ground. "Wait!" The word cut through the tension like a knife. Every head turned toward Sam as he stepped out of the shadows, his heart hammering against his ribs. The faces staring back at him showed everything from surprise to anger to outright disbelief. "What did you just say, boy?" Silas Murphy's voice was dangerously quiet as he emerged from the stable office, drawn by the commotion. Sam's throat felt dry as desert sand, but he forced the words out. "I said wait. I can help with the horse." Jake Murphy's face twisted with incredulous rage. "Have you lost your damn mind, Cortez? That's Iron Hand Dalton. He's killed more men than smallpox." "His daughter's dying," Sam replied, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "Horse just needs a shoe and some stitches. Won't take but half an hour." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. Someone shouted about harboring criminals. Another voice mentioned the reward money they'd be giving up. But Sam kept his eyes on Dalton, who had turned back with something like hope flickering in his weathered face. "You'd do that?" Dalton asked quietly. "For a stranger? For someone like me?" Sam nodded toward the photograph, still visible in Dalton's coat pocket. "For her. No child should die because adults can't see past their fear." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot, and Sam knew there was no taking them back. He'd made his choice, drawn his line in the sand. Whatever came next, he'd face it knowing he'd chosen compassion over cowardice, Mercy over mob mentality. Dalton's eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. Son, I won't forget this kindness. But around them, the circle of anger was tightening, and Sam could feel the weight of every hostile stare boring into his back like bullets waiting to be fired. The explosion of rage came like a flash flood. Silas Murphy's face turned the color of dried blood as he stormed across the stable yard, his boots kicking up dust with each furious step. Behind him, Jake, Bull, and Clem formed a threatening wall of muscle and malice. "Have you lost your goddamn mind, Cortez?" Murphy's voice carried the crack of a bullwhip. "That man's wanted dead or alive in 3 territories, and you want to help him?" Sam was already moving toward Dalton's injured horse, his hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. "His daughter's dying, Mr. Murphy. Won't take, but I don't give a rat's ass about his daughter." Murphy grabbed Sam's shoulder, spinning him around with enough force to make him stumble. "You work for me, boy, and I say we don't serve killers and outlaws." The growing crowd pressed closer, their voices rising in angry agreement. Sam could see faces he'd known his whole life. Mrs. Henderson from the general store, Tom Bradley who ran the telegraph office, even old Pete Martinez who'd always been kind to his mother. Now they all looked at him like he'd betrayed them, like he'd sided with the devil himself. "Please, Mr. Murphy," Sam tried to keep his voice reasonable, "just look at her leg. It's a clean wound, and the horse is sound otherwise. I can have her ready in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to help a murderer escape justice," Jake snarled, stepping forward with his fist clenched. "You stupid Mexican, don't you understand what you're doing?" Dalton's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "The boy's got nothing to do with my sins. Your quarrel's with me." "Stay out of this, killer," Murphy snapped, without taking his eyes off Sam. "This is about my employee forgetting his place." Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach at those words. His place. As if his place was to watch children die because their fathers made bad choices. As if his place was to let fear overrule compassion. "My place," Sam said quietly, "is helping that little girl live to see another day." The slap came so fast Sam barely saw it coming. Murphy's open palm caught him across the cheek with enough force to snap his head to the side, sending his hat spinning into the dust. The sharp crack echoed off the stable walls like a gunshot. "Your place," Murphy hissed, "is doing what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it." Sam straightened slowly, his cheek burning, blood trickling from where Murphy's ring had split his lip. Around them, the crowd had gone silent, watching with the hungry fascination of people witnessing a public execution. "No, sir," Sam said, his voice steady as stone. "My place is being the kind of man my mother raised me to be." Murphy's eyes went wide with disbelief, then narrow with fury. He nodded to his boys. "Jake, Bull, teach him some manners." The first punch came from Jake, a heavy right cross that caught Sam in the ribs and doubled him over, gasping. Before he could recover, Bull's meaty fist slammed into his kidney, sending him to his knees in the dust. "Stop!" Dalton's voice cracked like thunder, his hand moving toward his gun. "Draw that iron and you'll have 20 bullets in you before you clear leather," Murphy warned, and Sam could see the townspeople had indeed armed themselves. Rifles, shotguns, and pistols all pointed at the gunslinger. Dalton's hand froze, his face twisted with helpless rage and anguish. "He's just a boy trying to help." "He's a boy who forgot which side of the tracks he belongs on," Murphy replied coldly. Clem kicked Sam in the stomach, folding him over like a jackknife. Then Jake grabbed him by the hair, hauling him upright just long enough for Bull to drive another fist into his face. Sam felt his nose break with a wet crunch, blood streaming down his chin to spatter in the dust. "You want to help outlaws?" Jake panted between punches. "Here's what happens to outlaw sympathizers." Through the haze of pain, Sam heard Dalton's voice, thick with emotion he was fighting to control. "Son, I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." Sam managed to lift his head, one eye already swelling shut, and met the gunslinger's tortured gaze. Don't be sorry for doing right." Murphy nodded to his boys, and they let Sam drop face first into the dirt like a discarded sack of grain. "Get out," Murphy told Dalton. "Take your dying daughter and your bleeding heart and get the hell out of my town." The dust settled slowly around Sam's broken body as the crowd began to disperse, their bloodlust satisfied and their righteousness vindicated. He lay in the dirt like a discarded rag doll, tasting copper and grit, feeling the desert heat seep through his torn shirt into the raw wounds on his back. Through his one good eye, he watched Dalton's boots approach, then stop just inches from his face. The gunslinger knelt down, his voice barely a whisper. "Son, what's your name?" "Sam," he managed through split lips, the word coming out thick and slurred. "Sam Cortez." "Sam Cortez," Dalton repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I won't forget what you tried to do. I swear on my daughter's life, I won't forget." Dalton stood slowly, his spurs jingling like funeral bells as he walked back to his injured horse. Sam heard the creak of leather as the outlaw mounted up, then the uneven clip-clop of hooves as they disappeared down Main Street, growing fainter with each painful step. The stable yard emptied gradually. The townspeople drifted back to their businesses and their safe, comfortable lives, leaving Sam alone in the dirt with his broken nose and his bruised ribs and something that hurt far worse than any physical wound, the knowledge that he'd failed. Somewhere out there, a little girl named Elena Dalton was dying, while her father rode a lame horse through the desert, racing against time and losing. Deputy Pete Coleman was the first to approach, his weathered face creased with concern and something that might have been shame. He knelt beside Sam, his voice gentle. "Jesus, boy, they worked you over good. Can you sit up?" With Coleman's help, Sam struggled into a sitting position, the world spinning dangerously around him. Blood dripped steadily from his nose onto his torn shirt, and every breath sent fire through his ribs. "Why'd you do it, Sam?" Coleman asked, pulling out a handkerchief to dab at the worst of the bleeding. "You had to know what would happen." Sam was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts through the haze of pain. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Because she was 8 years old, Pete. 8 years old with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, and she was going to die because her daddy made some bad choices." He looked up at the deputy with his one good eye. "How was I supposed to live with that?" Coleman sighed deeply, shaking his head. "World ain't fair, son. Never has been. Sometimes you got to look out for yourself first." "Maybe," Sam replied, struggling to his feet with Coleman's assistance. "But my mom always told me that when you got a choice between being safe and being right, you look in the mirror and decide what kind of man you want to see looking back." The deputy helped him over to the water trough, where Sam splashed the cool water on his face, watching his blood swirl pink in the basin. His reflection stared back at him, swollen, battered, defeated, but somehow, for the first time in his 18 years, he recognized the man looking back. "Murphy's telling everyone you're fired," Coleman said quietly. "Says you're not welcome in any establishment in Dust Creek. Might be best if you moved on." Sam nodded, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through his skull. He'd expected as much. In a town like Dust Creek, showing kindness to the wrong person was a crime worse than murder. "Where will you go?" "Don't know," Sam admitted, dunking his whole head in the trough and letting the water wash away the worst of the blood. "Maybe Silver City. Maybe just keep riding until I find somewhere that don't mind a man with a conscience." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sam gathered his few possessions from the stable. His tools, his extra shirt, the small wooden cross his mother had given him for protection. Everything he owned in the world fit into a single canvas bag. The other stable hands watched him go with a mixture of superiority and unease, as if they couldn't quite meet his eyes. They'd chosen their side, and it was the safe one, the profitable one, the one that let them sleep soundly at night, knowing they'd never have to question their choices. Sam walked out of Murphy's livery for the last time, his shadow stretching long across the dusty yard. Behind him, the horses nickered softly in their stalls, as if saying goodbye to the only person who'd ever truly understood them. The sun had barely crested the eastern hills when the thunder of hooves shattered the morning quiet of Dust Creek. Sam woke with a start in the abandoned lean-to behind Martinez's cantina, where he'd spent the night, his body still aching from yesterday's beating. Through the gaps in the weathered wood, he could see dust clouds rising from multiple riders approaching fast from the north road. But these weren't the usual drifters or cattle drivers. Even through his swollen eye, Sam could make out the disciplined formation, the matching black horses, the glint of silver badges catching the early light. Territorial marshals, at least a dozen of them, riding with the kind of purpose that meant serious business. Sam limped to the edge of the lean-to, his ribs protesting with each movement. The lead rider was a tall man in an expensive black coat, sitting his horse with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Behind him rode Deputy U.S. Marshal Sarah Chen, whose reputation for tracking down wanted men was legendary across 3 territories. The formation came to a halt directly in front of Murphy's livery, their horses dancing impatiently as townspeople began emerging from buildings like prairie dogs from their holes. Sam could see Murphy himself stumbling out of the Silver Dollar Saloon, still buttoning his vest, his face pale with hangover and sudden fear. The lead rider dismounted with fluid grace, his boots hitting the dusty street with authority. When he removed his hat, revealing silver hair and steel-gray eyes, Sam's breath caught. Even a stable boy in Dust Creek knew that face, Judge Theodore Whitman, the territorial judge whose word was law from the Colorado border to the Rio Grande. Silas Murphy, Judge Whitman's voice carried clearly across the morning air, each word precise as a gavel strike. "I understand you had some trouble here yesterday." Murphy approached cautiously, his usual bluster replaced by nervous deference. "Judge Whitman, sir. What brings you to our little town?" "Justice, Mr. Murphy. I'm told one of your employees was beaten yesterday for showing Christian charity to a man in need." Murphy's face flushed red. "Now hold on, Judge. That boy was helping a known criminal. Jack Dalton's wanted for—" "Jack Dalton," Judge Whitman interrupted, his voice carrying a strange weight, "arrived at the Territorial Hospital in Red Rock at 11:30 last night. His daughter is alive, Mr. Murphy. The anti-venom worked. She'll make a full recovery." A murmur rippled through the growing crowd. Sam felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of grief he didn't even know he'd been carrying. The little girl with the gap-toothed smile would live to see another day. That's good news, Judge," Murphy stammered, clearly confused about where this was heading. "But I still don't understand why. Jack Dalton is my son." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Gasps and whispers erupted from every corner as people tried to process this impossible revelation. Judge Whitman, the iron-fisted upholder of territorial law, related to the most wanted outlaw in 3 states? Murphy's jaw worked soundlessly, his face cycling through disbelief, fear, and dawning comprehension of just how badly he'd miscalculated. 15 years ago, Judge Whitman continued, his voice steady but strained with old pain, "my son made some terrible choices. He fell in with bad men, committed crimes I cannot excuse or forgive. I disowned him, cut him from my life completely. I told myself it was justice, that the law had to be blind even to family." He paused, his steel-gray eyes scanning the crowd until they found Sam's battered face in the shadows. "But yesterday, a young man in your employ showed my son, and my granddaughter, a mercy I had denied them for 15 years. He risked everything to help a child he'd never met, asked for nothing in return, and was beaten for his compassion." Marshal Chen stepped forward, a folded document in her hand. "Silas Murphy, you're under arrest for assault and violation of territorial civil rights statutes. Your business license is hereby revoked, pending a full investigation into discriminatory practices. "You can't do this," Murphy sputtered. "This is my town. I built this place." "You built nothing but hatred and fear," Judge Whitman replied coldly. "Jake Murphy, Bull Henderson, Clem Watson, you're all under arrest as accessories." As the marshals moved in with shackles, Judge Whitman walked across the dusty street toward Sam's hiding place, each step measured and deliberate. "Son," he called out, his voice carrying a surprising gentleness, "would you step out here, please? I believe we have some talking to do." Sam emerged from the shadows slowly, his battered body protesting each step. The morning sun felt different on his face now, warmer somehow, less harsh than it had been for the past 18 years. As he approached Judge Whitman, the crowd parted before him, their expressions transformed from yesterday's hostility to something approaching awe. The judge studied Sam's injuries with the careful eye of a man who'd seen too much violence in his courtroom. His jaw tightened as he took in the split lip, the blackened eye, the way Sam held his ribs when he breathed. "My God," Judge Whitman murmured, "they did this to you for showing mercy?" "They did what they thought was right, sir," Sam replied quietly, though his voice carried no bitterness. "People get scared. They do things they might not otherwise do." Judge Whitman's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're defending them? After what they did?" Sam shook his head carefully. "Not defending, Judge. Just understanding. Fear makes folks cruel sometimes. Don't mean I agree with it." Behind them, Murphy and his boys were being loaded into a prison wagon, their shackles clanking in the morning air. Murphy caught sight of Sam, and his face twisted with rage. "This ain't over, you hear me, Cortez? You think having friends in high places makes you better than the rest of us?" Judge Whitman turned, his voice cutting through Murphy's rant like a blade. "Mr. Murphy, you're quite right. This isn't over. When you stand trial, the full extent of your crimes will be laid bare. Every act of discrimination, every worker cheated, every man beaten for the color of his skin or the sound of his name." He looked back at Sam, his expression softening. "Son, what's your full name?" "Samuel Diego Cortez, sir." "Samuel," Judge Whitman repeated, testing the name. "Yesterday you showed my family a kindness I'd failed to show for 15 years. You saw past my son's reputation, his mistakes, his failures, and you helped him save the most precious thing in his world." The judge reached into his coat and withdrew a leather folder. "I can't undo the years I lost with Jack. Can't take back the harsh words or the closed doors. But I can make sure that the man who saved my granddaughter gets the recognition he deserves." He opened the folder, revealing an official document bearing the territorial seal. "Samuel Cortez, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I hereby appoint you as the new proprietor of this livery stable. The territorial government is seizing Murphy's assets to compensate his victims, and you'll be first among them." Sam stared at the document, his one good eye wide with disbelief. "Sir, I don't understand. I can't pay for something like this." "You already have," Judge Whitman replied firmly. "You paid with your blood, your courage, and your compassion. The least I can do is ensure you have the means to build the kind of establishment you see fit, one that judges men by their character, not their reputation." Marshal Chen stepped forward with another document. "There's more, Mr. Cortez. The territorial government is offering you a contract to provide horses and stable services for all official business in this region. It's steady work, good pay, and complete autonomy over how you run your operation." Sam's hands trembled as he took the papers, hardly daring to believe what he was reading. Around them, the townspeople watched in stunned silence as their world shifted on its axis. "Why?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why all this for someone like me?" Judge Whitman placed a gentle hand on Sam's shoulder. "Because yesterday, when everyone else saw an outlaw, you saw a father. When they saw a threat, you saw a man in pain. The world needs more people who lead with their hearts, Samuel. It needs fewer people who lead with their fears. He glanced toward the north road, where dust still hung in the air from his son's desperate ride. Jack sent word with one of my marshals. He wanted me to tell you that Elena is asking for the nice man who helped her papa. She wants to know if you like horses, because she's got a pony she'd like you to meet when she's feeling better. Tears rolled down Sam's cheeks, mixing with the dried blood and dust. For 18 years, he'd wondered what it would feel like to truly belong somewhere, to be seen as more than just hired help or a problem to be managed. Now, standing in the morning sun, with the deed to his own stable in his hands, and the respect of the most powerful man in the territory, Sam finally knew he was home.